Living alone after 70 is not something to be feared or pitied. It's something to be understood. And when embraced, it can become one of the most peaceful, meaningful seasons of your life. This video is for those who have entered this chapter and are beginning to see that friendship in old age does not need to look the way it used to. You no longer need to attend every gathering, keep up with everyone's birthdays, or explain why your phone isn't ringing like it used to. What matters now is emotional closeness, not social noise. A kind word from your neighbor, a quiet conversation with your daughter, or the gentle company of your own thoughts. These are the connections that truly nourish the soul. In the next few minutes, I'll share with you 6 powerful truths that have changed how I live joyfully alone, and why letting go of old expectations has made room for deeper, simpler, and more lasting forms of connection. If you've ever felt like fewer friends meant less value, or that solitude was something to escape, this message is especially for you. Stay with me, subscribe if this speaks to your journey, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts below. Your story matters. Sometimes it takes getting older to finally understand what friendship really means. In our younger years, many of us were taught, quietly, persistently, that being surrounded by people was a sign of success. We were encouraged to stay busy, to stay connected, to always be available. And for a long time, we followed that rhythm, believing that the more friends we had, the more meaningful our lives would feel. But something begins to shift after 70. The noise fades, the rush slows down, and what once felt essential begins to feel unnecessary. You may find yourself no longer craving invitations, no longer needing small talk, and no longer measuring your days by how many people you saw. Instead, you start noticing how deeply your heart responds to just one genuine voice, someone who listens without distraction, someone who remembers your favorite tea, someone who doesn't need many words to make you feel safe and understood. These are the moments that matter now. A call from your daughter where she asks how you're really doing. A quiet meal shared with a friend who's walked beside you for decades. A simple wave from the neighbor across the street that makes you feel, even for a moment, less alone. As we age, energy becomes more precious, and so does time. That's why we begin to choose differently, not out of bitterness, but out of wisdom. We no longer try to maintain every friendship we've ever made, because we've come to see that some connections were built for a season, not a lifetime. And that's okay. There's a quiet freedom in letting go of the obligation to please everyone, to keep up, to explain. When you realize that one sincere relationship can do more for your soul than a dozen shallow ones, the way you connect begins to change. You begin to care less about the number of names in your phone and more about whether any of them truly know who you are. And in that shift, something beautiful happens. You stop chasing the idea of community and start recognizing it in the smallest of ways, in a shared glance, a knowing silence, or a voice that still remembers the sound of yours. In old age, friendship isn't about the crowd that surrounds you. It's about the handful of people, or even just one, who help you feel seen without saying a word. And once you stop measuring your life by the number of people in it, something else quietly begins to bloom, the space to simply be with yourself. In a world that often equates stillness with sadness and solitude with loneliness, it takes courage to sit with silence and not feel empty. But as the years pass, many older adults discover that there is a kind of calm that only comes when the world stops asking so much of you, and you finally have permission to ask more of yourself. Solitude, when not forced but chosen, becomes a kind of homecoming. You begin to notice the small things again, the sound of birds returning in the morning, the warmth of sunlight resting gently on your lap, the quiet comfort of your own breath moving slowly in and out. These aren't moments to fill or rush through. They are moments to feel. For those of us who spent our lives putting others first, raising children, managing households, caring for parents or spouses, being alone isn't a punishment, it's a return to self. It's where the scattered pieces of your attention finally gather again, not to serve someone else, but to tend gently to the person you are now. There is wisdom in learning how to be your own companion, to make peace with the silence, not as something to fight, but as something that speaks to you in ways that noise never could. You don't have to constantly explain yourself. You don't have to smile if you don't feel like it. You don't need to perform or entertain or justify. In solitude, there is no one to impress, only someone to understand, and that someone is you. As the outside world grows quieter, your inner world begins to grow louder in the best possible way. You start to hear your thoughts more clearly. You remember things you hadn't thought of in years. You revisit dreams you had set aside. And in doing so, you don't become smaller. You become whole. Living alone after 70 does not mean the end of connection. It can mean the beginning of reconnection with your spirit, your memories, your values. That stillness, once feared, now becomes a friend that walks beside you, never rushing, never judging, simply reminding you that your presence, even in solitude, is enough. As you begin to feel more at peace in your own presence, another quiet realization often follows. You no longer have to live according to what the world expects from you. For many older adults, especially after retirement, the pressure to stay socially engaged can feel more like a performance than a choice. Society often suggests that we must keep moving, keep mingling, keep proving that we're still active to be seen as aging gracefully. But in truth, grace does not come from keeping up, it comes from letting go. And that release is not weakness, it is wisdom. You don't have to be at every luncheon, join every club, or explain why you no longer enjoy large gatherings. Maybe you find more comfort now in reading a book by the window than in attending a noisy event. Maybe writing a letter brings you more connection than scrolling through endless photos online. These preferences are not signs of withdrawal, they are signs of clarity. When you release the need to appear social just to satisfy someone else's image of healthy aging, you make room for authenticity. That is the deeper kind of wellness, the kind that can't be photographed or counted by how many friends you have. True connection, especially in later years, begins with being honest about what nourishes your spirit. And for some, that means choosing quiet over chaos, meaning over momentum, and intention over obligation. There is a soft kind of power in saying, I no longer need to explain myself. You've already lived so much life, held so many roles, and carried so many responsibilities. This season is not about proving anything, it's about being. It's about learning to trust your own rhythm, even when it moves more slowly than the world around you. And when you give yourself that permission, something shifts inside. You begin to feel lighter, not because your schedule is full, but because your soul finally isn't. In this space, your worth is no longer tied to social approval or outward productivity. It lives quietly in how you treat yourself, in the choices you make, and in the way you allow yourself to rest. And perhaps the most healing truth of all is this: aging is not a race to stay relevant. It is an invitation to return to what is real. As you begin to free yourself from the weight of social expectations, something gentle begins to take root, a new awareness of the quiet connections all around you. While we often think of friendship as something grand and ongoing, in this season of life, connection often shows up in quieter forms. A brief conversation with the clerk at the pharmacy, the familiar wave from your neighbor on their morning walk, or a kind smile exchanged at the post office. These moments, once overlooked, begin to feel like little threads holding the fabric of your days together. And though they may seem small, they matter deeply. When driving becomes more difficult, when invitations slow down, or when friends move away or pass on, these simpler interactions become lifelines, not because they are loud or long, but because they carry warmth without demand. You are not required to be anyone but yourself, and in that space you begin to feel more human again. Even technology, which once felt like a distant world, can become a bridge instead of a barrier. A short video message from your granddaughter, a photo sent from an old friend, or a typed-out "thinking of you" email can offer a spark of comfort and continuity, reminding you that distance doesn't have to mean disconnection. These are not replacements for deep relationships, but gentle supplements to the life you already have. In many ways, small talk with strangers or simple check-ins with loved ones become a kind of wellness practice, helping you stay emotionally engaged without overwhelming your energy. And when those interactions are sincere, even if brief, They offer something we all long for: to feel seen. The beauty of growing older is that you begin to notice what others miss. You start to value presence over performance, kindness over obligation, and recognition over routine. There is dignity in that awareness, and healing in those tiny moments of real contact. As we grow older, it's not about reaching out to more people, it's about being open to what's already here. You begin to realize that connection doesn't always knock loudly, it often whispers. And when you learn to listen for it, your world, though smaller, begins to feel more complete. As you grow more attuned to the quiet connections around you, you may begin to notice that some of the most powerful relationships are not found in new friendships, but in the ones that have endured. Those that have weathered decades of change and still remain. In this season of life, family often becomes the anchor, not necessarily because of obligation, but because of history, memory, and something deeper than words. There's a certain comfort in hearing the voice of someone who has known you through all your seasons, who remembers the younger version of you, not just with nostalgia, but with tenderness. A phone call from a son who still checks in, the gentle teasing of a grandchild that makes you laugh from the belly, or the quiet presence of a partner who no longer needs to ask how you feel because they already sense it. These are the relationships that carry weight far beyond surface conversation. Even when family is far away or not always easy, the long-standing bonds often hold meaning that newer connections cannot replicate. And for those whose families are chosen, dear friends, loyal caregivers, trusted neighbors, these relationships too become a kind of family, grounded not in biology but in shared care. As the world moves faster and many things feel transient, these lasting ties become your emotional grounding, a place to return when everything else feels uncertain. They hold your stories, your wisdom, your little quirks, and your long-held traditions. And it is in these steady, familiar presences that you may rediscover a part of yourself that the rush of earlier life never allowed you to fully see. There's a quiet strength in continuity, in knowing that someone else still sees the child in your eyes, the struggles you've survived, the love you've given. You don't need to explain your silence, or your need for rest, or your slower pace, because they already understand. And in that understanding, you feel something so rare in today's world: safety. These relationships do not ask you to perform, they simply invite you to be. As time passes, they become fewer perhaps, but they become deeper. And when you look at your life and ask what truly sustained you, not what impressed others, but what held you together, you'll find that it was always love. Quiet, enduring, imperfect love. The kind that doesn't fade, the kind that remembers. As we reflect on the people who have stood by us, there also comes a moment when we must turn inward and ask what remains when the room is empty, when the house is quiet, and when we are left only with ourselves. For many older adults, this question is not just philosophical, it is deeply personal. After a lifetime of being needed, of wearing different roles, spouse, parent, provider, caretaker, there comes a time when those roles soften or disappear entirely, and with them, sometimes, goes a sense of identity. But beneath the titles and tasks, there is still someone deeply alive inside, someone worthy, someone enough. This chapter of life, often misunderstood as a time of loss, can instead be one of rediscovery. You begin to see that your worth is not something others grant. It's something you reclaim. It's in the quiet rituals you choose for yourself each morning, the way you speak kindly to your reflection, the books you reach for, and the memories you hold sacred. You start doing things not because you have to, but because they bring you a quiet joy. Maybe it's sitting with your journal and letting your thoughts pour out without apology. Maybe it's preparing your favorite meal and savoring each bite as a way of honoring yourself. These moments aren't grand, but they are grounding. And in them you begin to feel whole again. It's a beautiful kind of freedom when you stop needing to be defined by what you do or who you're with. You stop chasing relevance and start resting in presence. And what's most powerful is this: when you begin to love your own company, the world no longer feels so empty. You are no longer waiting to be chosen, invited, or validated. You are already home within yourself. There is a quiet dignity in that, a sense of peace that doesn't need to be explained to anyone. You've walked through enough to know that joy doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it comes softly, through acceptance, through gratitude, through simply being. And when you begin to live from that place, where your self-worth no longer wavers with the world, you step into a different kind of strength. Not loud, not flashy, but lasting. The kind of strength that carries you through the rest of your days and lights them from within. In the quiet rhythm of growing older, we come to understand that life doesn't have to be loud to be full, and solitude doesn't mean something is missing. It often means we've finally made space for what matters most. Living joyfully alone after 70 is not about shutting the world out. It's about opening your heart to yourself, honoring the wisdom you've earned, and recognizing that your worth was never meant to be measured by the number of names in your phone or the invitations on your calendar. Friendship in old age looks different, but it can feel even more real, more nourishing when built on truth, not obligation. And perhaps most importantly, emotional wellness, self-respect, and peaceful independence are not luxuries. They are rights that come with age. If this video has spoken to something inside you, I invite you to share your experience in the comments below. What have you learned about connection, about solitude, about aging gracefully? Your story could be the light someone else is looking for. In this season of life, we don't need to impress. We need to belong, to feel seen, and to keep growing inward. Because the journey doesn't end with age, it deepens. And when we learn to embrace that depth, we find that living joyfully alone may be one of the richest forms of living there is.